We have seen multiple times users leaving negative reviews in sites like Metacritic and Steam Store before completing a title, often done to criticize the developers rather than the game itself. Even if we all agree this to be a prerogative stand rather than a genuine review, this poses the question, how much of a game do you need to complete before reviewing it? Or in other words, can we review a game before completing it? First things first, roll the intro. At first, this question may appear to be rhetorical. Of course you need to finish a game before reviewing it. How can you write or narrate a review if you have not completed what you're reviewing? And while this is very true, the more I think about this question and the more I realize that there are some scenarios harder to judge. Let us take an RPG like Nier Automata as an example. If someone rushes through an adventure, he or she could finish the game in about 10 hours. They could skip much of the side content and just do the main quest fairly quickly. But what if someone has played more of the game, completing side content and thus accumulating triple the amount of hours without actually completing the game? Who between these two people is more qualified to review Nier Automata? The concept of completing a game is not that linear for every title, and the scenario where you quote-unquote finish the game do not always align with the knowledge required to review a game. The opposite is also true. There are scenarios where not completing a game simply gives the reviewer a huge blank too big to avoid. In today's video, I wish to discuss these scenarios to answer the question in the title, do you need to complete a title to review it? This is a bit of a free discussion. It will not be divided into pro and against blocks, but rather a uniform discussion split into various aspects of the question in hand. Firstly, defining what finishing a game means, then discussing if completion is required for review, and lastly, addressing the context the review is in. Do you need to complete a title to review it? Let us find out. Before even answering the question, we need to define complete in the gaming world. Unlike movies where the storytelling ends after 2 hours when the credits roll, perhaps leaving a final teaser at the very end of screening time, video games often have a more complex progression, and thus more complex conclusion. More often than not, games offer players a dynamic way to approach the story. Some games have side quests, some others multiple endings, and some others have no defining ending. Does a strategy game like Civilization finish after completing one singular run? Does a game like the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe finish once all 20 plus endings are completed? But let us avoid an unorthodox example and take mainstream titles instead. Can a game be considered truly completed if only one of the alternative endings is reached? A game like Fire Emblem Three Houses has a lot of content behind 3 different runs, but does a game need to be played 3 different times before claiming completion? This may sound as nitpicking, but do reflect on all the games that have alternative content you simply miss because you chose a particular game style or a particular faction within the main story. Completing a game with one set of skills may induce the reviewer not to review the game as a whole, but to review the game played in his or her style. The same applies for the story. You may simply choose a different path and experience one phase of the tale. The reviewer needs to bet whether or not other choices led to significant different progression or the same result. Games may hide content or give the illusion of choice, both important factors but unreliable if not tested by conducting more runs. I will not spoil the ending of Fallout 4, but to keep it vague, there are 4 different ending paths that at first seem to be very unique when choosing, but googling the alternative endings revealed that at least 3 of them are basically the same. If I would have not known this information, I would have presumed that there would be 4 very clear different endings, yet there aren't, and if I finished the game, I could not add such critique to my analysis without playing the game again. To put it simply, there is not a defined moment where a gamer can claim to have completed a game doing a satisfactory number of side activities to say with firmness, I finished this title as intended by the developers. Completing a game suddenly feels a bit abstract. Neither the player nor the game developers wish for the game to be closed after the credits roll, so the quantity of side activities within a title is copious, but avoidable. To do it all, however, could quadruple the time spent within a game. To say you finished a game, do you really need to observe every single possible outcome for every single individual quest within the world? Actually, this brings me to the next point, completionism. Games are commercial products that appeal not only for replayability as already addressed, but also completionism. Sure, you may have completed the main story of Breath of the Wild, but the game's main story is but a grain in the sand when compared to its massive world and uncountable mysteries. If you visit the website How Long to Beat It, you will observe how many of the game's completionist average times are exponentially higher than the normal main plus side. Yakuza 0 for instance jumps from 30 to 140 hours. Do you honestly need to play 140 hours of Yakuza 0 before you state you finished the game? And what about achievements? Do you need to obtain them all before completing a game 100%? Achievements often, but not always, parallel in-game progression, but are still theoretically not a part of a game. Mechanically speaking, achievements are handled by whatever system the game is running in, Steam, PlayStation or Xbox, and are facultative for the completion of a game as intended within the game itself. Let me make a concrete example. Civilization 5 has nearly 300 achievements, most of them being win a campaign with X civilization for Y difficulty, but some are more unique. The achievement The Roads of Colossus asks for the player to complete a railway from Cairo to Cape Town as the United Kingdom in the Scramble for Africa scenario. This achievement is not native to the game. You do not get anything within the campaign if you do such activity. If you do complete this railway, you do get the achievement on Steam. So it's not completing all achievements, not completing the game. It's completing all achievements but not the in-game tasks, still completing the game. But looking over achievements, a topic I might do a whole separate video about, I hope it made you understand that the concept of completing a game is within itself abstract and relative. I think it is not an unpopular opinion that gamers should not complete every single achievement to claim they have finished a title, especially if these achievements are detached from the game and are added post-launch. Going back on track, what does it mean to truly finish a game? To be honest, this is a tricky question, since there is no universal answer that can satisfy all logical points brought so far. To me personally, I would say that completing the main story, plus doing a good amount of side activities and side quests, is sufficient to claim you have finished a game. We have dived into the philosophy of what it means to complete a game, a rabbit hole all within itself. For the sake of continuing discussion in the following blog, let us agree that a game is still completed when the main story is completed plus some of the side content. I still hope in this part of the video I spark some discussion, but let us move forward to discuss if the story of a game needs to be completed before reviewing it. Can a game still be reviewed without actually watching the final cutscene, the final credits, the text "thank you for playing"? It may not surprise you that what I'm about to say next is it depends. It always depends. You're not new to this channel, are you? The curious thing regarding video games is that the plot is only but an aspect of a title. Video games are composed of gameplay, combat systems, role design, lore, sound environments, graphics, art style, and so much more that makes the story element not the sole purpose of purchase for a player who's reading your review. Granted, there are games that are heavily story-based that would feel dishonest to review without completing, but there are some other games where the plot is simply not its main forte. For games like GTA, did you ever actually finish the plot? Sure, it's an element of a game, but some players simply do not even give the story a chance and consider it to be superfluous. One could argue that for coherence, someone should finish a game regardless of the weight the story has. After all, not all players might ignore it. When you review any game with an open world, you need to address the world building regardless if the game's main focus is elsewhere. If something is part of a game, it has to be addressed, and you cannot address something you have not completed. But again, is this always the case? To be frank, I've played Just Cause 4 70 hours and I did not bother to finish the main quest. I think I'm close to it, but it's still not over, yet I do not feel unqualified to talk, discuss, and even review the game. Is it disingenuous to claim I'm not qualified to give the game a judgment because I did not finish one of the most neglectable parts of such titles? Also, keep in mind that the plot and storytelling are two different elements that compose what is often referred to as the story. Plots are the events that take place within the game, but storytelling is the way, the method the story is told and narrated, and how the director of the game presents to the player its message. But why does this matter, you may ask? Simple, because more often than not what is shown and reported in a review is the storytelling of a game rather than the story itself. I can dislike a game's story, the things that happen to the characters and whatnot, but that's highly subjective, so I will not address it in a formal review. Storytelling is a more objective element, since the distinction between good and bad writing can be addressed in a more methodological way. If I were to review a game like Dark Souls, I would not speak about the specific events within the plot, but rather the way the game tells the story, its iconic, intriguing, scripting storytelling. Miyazaki has a way to tell his tale that is fascinating and well developed, regardless of what tale is told. So do I need to actually finish the story to understand the storytelling, what players are interested the most? Not to say that plot is not relevant when discussing a game. I bet you can probably think of a game or two that you know are well made, you know that the critics love it, but you simply can't like it because you think the story is weak. For me, that game is A Plague Tale: Innocence, the first title of a franchise that recently had a sequel. I simply believe that the plot degenerated so badly throughout the adventure that I found the game not enjoyable. The gameplay and the graphics are fine, I guess, but I despise the rationale behind certain plot decisions that if I were to review the game, I would penalize for it, even if I fully understand that for some, and apparently the majority of people, the plot can be enjoyed. For me, the adventure started great, but slowly went downhill, meaning that not completing the game would have left with a more positive take on the experience. So yes, in this case, finishing the story is a must to be able to address the game in its complete complexity, because a verdict without completing it would have left me with a different opinion. Luckily, I did not spend a penny to play this bad game. Real cool, Dandles. Actually, this is an interesting sub-question to answer. Do you need to finish a game you don't like to claim you don't like it? Can you write a bad review of a game you have not enjoyed but did not complete yet? This question can only be answered in the final blog, where I address the various different types of reviews. Reviews are tools that need both a purpose, an audience, and a context. It is important to make distinctions between different types of reviews in order to answer the question, do you need to complete a title to review it? Because depending on the situation, the answer can or cannot be flexible. By definition, reviews are judgments, a writer's opinion regarding a product or a piece of craftsmanship. But this judgment can come in various flavors. This could be opinion pieces, critical analysis, or full-on dissections of a game. A review can be as simple as a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I like a game, or I didn't, are short but still valuable reviews. If you express your judgment with a personal take of a game, I believe it is more than okay for you not to finish a game because you are expressing your opinion on the title in a very subjective manner. You are not trying to perfectly quantify all aspects of a title, you simply express the pros and cons you have with a particular game before completing it. I hate it when I do not enjoy a game and I'm told I need to play it 50 hours before expressing my opinion. Like, why would I waste 50 hours playing a game I do not enjoy just to state, 50 hours later, that I indeed did not enjoy a title? If a game only gets good after 50 hours, that's not a good game. But what if yours is not a personal opinion, but rather a professional take on a game? When I go to read a specific reviewer's piece of a newly released game, I do expect as a reader or as a listener that the reviewer did indeed analyze all aspects of a game, including its conclusion. Again, it truly depends on the game, but the bar is no longer that flexible if the reviewer has an oddly specific grade attached to it. I discussed in a previous video why some reviews like to have a grade at the end, and while I personally stand by my opinion that grades are not required, reviews that do have a number often indicate completion of a game by the reviewer. So if you as a reviewer are indeed playing a game you are not enjoying and decide to abandon it, you cannot give a deterministic verdict that is weighted at the same level as everyone else's, but rather an opinion piece that takes in consideration your subjective bias rather than an objective standard. You may as a professional already have a concise and precise opinion formulated by analyzing every other aspect of a game by its conclusion. However, I would feel uneasy not knowing if the reviewer did or did not finish the game reviewed to convince me to or not to buy it. If a reviewer gives a bad score to a game that fans love and they found out the reviewer did not finish the game, that could cause some friction along the way. In general, I would divide reviews into three categories. 3 opinion pieces that are highly informal and subjective that do not require the completion of a game to be shared, very formal reviews that aim to be as objective as analytical as possible and need the completion of a game to be formed, and something along the middle that can be analytical but less formal, and thus may or may not need the completion of a game to be published. Personally, my review videos tend to be in this latter category. I finished all games I've discussed so far in my channel, but since these reviews are still a bit informal, I could review games like Just Cause 4, that I did not finish, confidently, without feeling guilty. Of course it goes without saying that the safer thing to do when reviewing is to state clearly how much of the game was more or less completed to avoid any misunderstanding. There is no shame to state, even if I don't finish this game, I can state that, because then the audience is more at ease knowing at what point of the game you are starting your discussion. So, the $1 million question still remains. Do you need to complete a title to review it? There is no simple summary to the various answers I gave in this video, but in general, I would suggest to weigh in the definition of completion, the game's reliance on the plot, and the context of the review to determine yourself what is permissible and what is not. At the end of the day, I do need to admit that finishing a game is at large a safer bet, so if you are truly undecided, I would not risk it. Nevertheless, even if this might have been the answer all along, I hope today I illustrate the various interpretations the questions may have, and I do hope I made you think regarding review writing. If you made it this far, I wish to thank you one too many completed review times for watching today's video. This was a bit of a long one, and even if I know these quote-unquote philosophical discussions regarding reviews and review writing may not always be super popular, I hope you like this video and share your opinion on the topic down in the comments below. Do you need to complete a title to review it? Let me know. Having said that, I invite you to leave this video a like, to share it and subscribe for more. I wish you a wonderful day, and as always, arrivederci!